Okay, Sunday morning Kollel. We are a few days from Yom Kippur and we have chosen an intriguing topic, a very interesting topic, and that is the controversy of Kaparos. Is it a holy ancient minhag or perhaps something a little more sinister? And as we go through the shir with many interesting sources, you will find some fascinating information, and hopefully we'll get down to the bottom of it, what truly is behind this mysterious custom of Kaporos. So before we get to Kaporos, just to make a disclaimer, there's a major part of Judaism is obviously the halacha, the things you have to do, the things you're not allowed to do. And even there's a hierarchy. Is it from the Chachamim that say you have to or you have to abstain? Is it from the Chumash? Is it from the Torah? Even if it's biblical, is it based on a mitzvah saseh, a positive command, or it's a loy saseh? Does it carry chorus, right? Every activity we're engaged with, there's a major hierarchy. And then you have a whole world, an arena of minhagim, of customs. We're familiar with the expression of Minhag Yisrael Toirahu, the custom of Yidden is Toirahu, is Torah. The source of where those words come from is not clear. There's a Tosfos in Masechta Menachos on Daf Chaf that says Minhag Aviseinu Toirahi. The minhag of our fathers is Torah. The minhag of our fathers is Torah. What's the explanation? A Minhag Yisrael becomes Torah. Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz was one of the great. He wrote the Halachas Ktanis, was a great Sephardic Gadol 300 years ago plus. So he writes that if a minhag spreads amongst all the Yidden, the Eibishter wouldn't allow that to happen unless it was pure. The very fact that minhag is so widespread is governed by the Eibishter's hashgacha, the Eibishter's providence. The Eibishter would not have seen to it that it becomes so widespread unless it's pure. And that's how we know Minhag Yisrael. Interesting gut feeling. Minhag Yisrael Toirahi. There's also a big debate how powerful minhagim are. There's a statement in Yerushalmi that a minhag can even break halacha. And the source is because al pi halacha, if you take a loan from someone, you have to pay back. But the minhag is we don't pay back loans. That's an old joke. But minhag breaks halacha. A minhag breaks halacha. You know, there was a great chassid of the Alter Rebbe, an incredible Torah scholar and a Rav Baruch Mordechai Babroisker, who was actually a teacher of the Chafetz Chaim when the Chafetz Chaim was young. The literatures aren't really aware of that. And Sukkos, we're coming to Sukkos. So Sukkos, he had a sukkah, and Rav Baruch Mordechai was behind on rent. So his landlord was a Yid, told Rav Baruch Mordechai, it's a shayla on your sukkah. It's a sukkah gzula, stolen sukkah. The land that you built it on, you're not paying the rent, it's a shayla on the sukkah. See, Sir Baruch Mordechai answered just the opposite. The mitzvah of sukkahs is teishvu ke'ein toduru. You have to live in the sukkah the way you live in your house. I never pay rent on my house, so I can't pay rent on my sukkah. Anyhow, so there's an idea that a minhag can even break halacha. But the Chassam Sofer is known. The Chassam Sofer has a letter. The Chassam Sofer believes any Minhag Yisrael that has been established across the board has biblical status. How could it have biblical status? It becomes a nationwide vow. It's a neder of the nation, and it's binding for all future generations. And it has the biblical status of a vow. In fact, we're coming from the 9 days. The Aruch HaShulchan even brings us about not eating meat before Tisha B'Av, the days leading up to Tisha B'Av, that such a minhag is so powerful. The Shulchan Aruch says whoever breaks the minhag should be bit by a snake. Whoever breaks the minhag of eating flesh before Tisha B'Av should be bitten by a snake. Why is so harsh? So the Aruch HaShulchan says, listen, once it's a minhag on Klal Yisrael, it becomes like a vow of the public, and it has biblical status. It seems that most disagree with the Chassam Sofer, because the Maharshal holds only if the minhag comes together with a cherem. Like when Rabbeinu Gershom said that from now on you don't marry more than one wife, you don't divorce a wife against her will, etc., on pain of cherem, so that's biblical, but stam minhagim not. But the Chassam Sofer holds that they are. Loi Sasser, well, the Pashtus Loi Sasser only applies on an edict given by the Bezdin Hagadol Shebi Yerushalayim. The Sefer HaChinuch does hold that any Chacham of any generation, it could be the central Chacham, but in any generation you can have the idea of Loi Sasser. But from the Rambam it seems like it's the Bezdin Hagadol Shebi Yerushalayim. It could be a debate between the Rambam and the Sefer HaChinuch. Anyhow, so back to our thing. So you have Minhagim, and Minhagim have their whole arena, and so there's a debate how powerful they are. But we all, every kid is acquainted with the expression of Minhag Yisrael Torah. And yet, some of the Minhagim lie in the greatest controversies between different communities and have led to debates, sometimes healthy, often unhealthy, and fearful debates, and frightening results. Let's actually begin with number. Before we even get to Kaparos, we're coming from Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, one of there's lots of innocent minhagim on Rosh Hashanah, right? Eating a pomegranate, no one's going to take an issue at eating a pomegranate. At least I haven't seen anyone take. But there's a minhag called Tashlich. You think Tashlich is so innocent? Well, you would think so. Look at number one. Number one is the Ramah in the Darchei Moshe. He's writing this 450 years ago. Kosev Maharil, he quotes the Maharil. Now, one thing we should know is the Maharil was at the end of the Rishonim. He passes away in the 1420s, about 1427. So he's in the end of the 1300s, early 1400s. He's in Mainz, in Germany. I think he's actually buried in Worms, but he lives in Germany. And he was considered like one of the last of the Rishonim. Many of our customs as Ashkenazim come from him, especially minhagim of the shul and the Beis Knesses. In fact, as it's well known, the nusach we have on the Yomim Noirayim, a lot of the nusach that we have goes generation back all the way to the Maharil. You're talking 600 years plus. The nusach that we have. There's actually a frightening story about the Maharil. He said about himself, he told his Talmidim, that he was invited somewhere in closer to the Austria area for Rosh Hashanah, and he davened. He was a chazan. The Maharil was a great chazan. He had a nice voice, and some say he even composed some songs. And there was a certain poem that he wanted to say because the author of that poem was actually buried in that city. So as chazan, he said, come on, we have to say that slicha. And the community members said, we've never said that before. But he said, listen, the guy's, Rabbi Ephraim was his name, he's buried here, we're going to say the slicha. And he said it. And a week later, he lost his daughter. His daughter passed away. And he said, it's because I changed the nusach. Because I changed the nusach. That's what he said. And he told it to his students. Students wrote, it's written in the Sfarim. It's written in the Sfarim. It's one of the old documented stories, a tragedy that happened to the Maharil. And the Maharil said after that, he made it his life's work to be shomer, to hold on to the traditions of all the nuschos and make sure they're perfect. Anyhow, but many of our minhagim come from the Maharil. So for example, the Maharil says in number one, the Ramah is quoting from the Maharil, Noigim leilach alana, we go to the river on Rosh Hashanah, and we say, Toshav Trachmeinu, have mercy on us, and V'sashlich, and throw in the depth of the water all their sins. Why do we do this on Rosh Hashanah? Because it's brought in Medrash that Zeicher la'Akedah, it's to reminisce what happened by the Akedah. Avraham Avinu went when Avraham was heading to the Akedah, before he knew it, he's deep in water, ad savori, till his neck. And he said, Hoshi Hashem, God help me, vo mayim ad nafesh, water has risen till my very soul. And to remember that, therefore on Rosh Hashanah, we go to the water. Now why, on Rosh Hashanah we do many things to remind us, Hashem, of the Akedah. Why is that? So according to some, the Akedah happened on Rosh Hashanah. There are a number of medrashim. There's a psikta. There's a this. There's a that. There's a few medrashim that say very black and white. In fact, it's not. It's explicit. It's forget about explicit. It's black and white. It says on Rosh Hashanah, the Akedah happened. However, the Chidah in a number of places talks about it, and he pushes that the Akedah happened on Yom Kippur, and he has a big debate with an earlier Rav, Rabbi Yehuda Ayas, who was a Rav in Northern Africa, who said it happened Rosh Hashanah. It's been a big debate. There's a Zoya that gets involved in this and that. But upon him, assuming that it happened on Rosh Hashanah, that would be a great reason why we go to Tashlich. It's because of the water. It's not because of the fish. It's because of the water. To remind us, the Eibishter, what happened by Avraham and the Akedah, that he was stuck in water. He said, God said. Continues the Ramah, V'chein b'minhagim. There's a sefer called Minhagim, from Yitzchak Isaac Tirna. He was actually a friend of the Maharil. So you're talking also 600 years ago plus. And the two of their Sfarim and some others really were the backbone of all Minhagi Ashkenaz. You know, the Baalei Tosfos didn't really write Sfarim on Minhagim. The real stuff we have on Minhagim came from the later scholars, these guys. And the Minhagim of Yitzchak Isaac Tirna and of the Maharil, and there's a couple others as well. But says the Ramah, Ella Shahoisif, but Reb Tirna adds, Sheroyin Dogim Chaim. The Maharil doesn't mention the fish. In the Minhagim of Reb Isaac Tirna, he says you want to find fish and live fish. Not like you have in some ponds here in 770 and you see the things that have been there since before Gimel Tammuz. Says the Ramah says, Efsher maybe, you know why you want live fish? We know fish are unaffected by an evil eye, but pashas because they can't be seen, they're covered by the water. So too we want to bring that good omen upon us, not to be affected by an evil eye. In addition, v'nifra v'nir b'kadagim, we should be fruitful like fish. That's the Ramah's own feeling. The Alter Rebbe quotes that in Shulchan Aruch as well. The reason you want live fish is for these two reasons. The Alter Rebbe in the Siddur quotes an idea which actually comes from the Shalah. The Shalah says there's more to it. There's always the esoteric layer. The Shalah says fish don't have eyelids. Their eyes are always open. It represents that God's eye is always open. God's eye is ever seeing. He's omnipresent and ever seeing. So Alter Rebbe brings that in the Siddur. The Shulchan Aruch he doesn't, because there is, he's quoting the Ramah. So you have all these beautiful reasons. The Akedah, we should be populate like fish, no ayin hara. The Chemdes Yomim talks about Tashlich as well. The Chemdes Yomim gives a reason that Rosh Hashanah is a day of judgment. We need water. Water is chesed. Water is chesed. You need water, Pasha, to mitigate the severity of the day. Others say, because when you crown a king, the Rambam paskins, when you anoint a king with a special oil, you do it by a spring of water. Rosh Hashanah, we're crowning Hashem, you do it by water. There's lots of reasons.
Did you say that the prayer was from the Chemdes Yomim?
Tashlich, it could be that part, the end of it, the last thing we say, the piyut, yeah, it's brought there. Look at number 2. The Levush gives another reason for Tashlich. A little frightening reason. He says, you know why you want fish? To realize we are like live fish, which nechazim b'mitzudah. Number 2, fish, they're there now, and in a moment they could be trapped in a net. There's a net hovering right above us on Rosh Hashanah. Kach anu nechazim b'mitzudas hamavis v'adin. There's a net right above us, the net of death and judgment. And if we start thinking about that, maybe it'll give us a bit of a kick in the tachas. Maybe we'll actually have a thought of tshuva. That's the Levush's own reason. The Levush often gives his own ideas, nice ideas. So you have all these reasons for Tashlich. It goes back 600, 700 years. The Maharil quotes it. The Minhagim of Yitzchak Isaac Tirna. The Ramah. The Shalah is talking about. The Levush is talking about it. Everyone does it. The Vilna Gaon didn't do Tashlich. In the Sefer Maaser Rav of his customs, no Tashlich. No Tashlich. Not just him, many of his Talmidim, and many descendants of his students, some of them that follow Minhag Gegra, do not do Tashlich. The Aderes, the great Aderes, was a great Torah scholar, the father-in-law of Rav Kook.
Did he give a reason why not?
Well, He didn't. It was just quoting his custom. The Aderes, who was living in Eretz Yisrael, going over a century ago, he also wanted to abolish the custom. He said, we become a laughing stock to the Goyim. He says the issue is that the women were going to the water and they were just talking and talking, more supplications. He says the Goyim think we're nuts. That was his words. We became a schoik amongst the Goyim. What are we doing? We've lost our marbles. We've lost the plot.
They think we're nuts.
Exactly. That's what Kiddush Levana talking. Well, you fell off the moon or something? No, that.
Waving branches and
So look at number 3, the Aruch HaShulchan. Reb Epstein, the Rav in Novardok, right? So he was one of the great poskim before the Holocaust. I mean, he passed away in 1908, but he was in the other side of the world. He was highly accepted, even over here. The early American Rabbonim, like Reb Moshe Feinstein, those that came from Europe, held the Aruch HaShulchan to be like the last word, much more than the Mishnah Brura. That's a fact. Over the last couple decades, the Mishnah Brura has become more popular than the Aruch HaShulchan, but originally also by the J.B. Soloveitchik, by the older Rabbonim, the Aruch HaShulchan had more prestige than the Mishnah Brura. Fine. Look what the Aruch HaShulchan says about. Now he met at Tzemach Tzedek, so he had a little link with Chabad, and he says about Tashlich, look at number 3. V'yazhir, be careful that women shouldn't go. Women should not go to Tashlich. And if they do go, men should not go. Men should not go. He says, because even without that, even without that, there are those that complain about the custom. He doesn't say why, but he says, besides for the tznius issue, there are those that want to do away with the custom. Many people, not just the Vilna Gaon, many people abstain mipnei tam hayedu lahem, for a reason they know. This is all code language. He doesn't want to get v'nachanu, and it's right. So he says the correct path is abolish Tashlich, especially if you have an issue with tznius, men and women. But he says even without that, even without the tznius, I'll take it off the table. He says even without that, he says people had issues with it. Many people abstain. They know their reasons, and it's correct. So there's a group of people that don't go to Tashlich. And as you wonder, there's so many reasons given, everyone talks about it. And it's not like the detractors started 600 years ago as well. No, for 400 years, the Minhag was untouched. Yeah, it's like from the Maharil until 250 years ago was untouched. I don't know if we know about anyone before the Vilna Gaon who officially abstained from Tashlich. I haven't seen any record. So this is interesting. You have a Minhag that went for 400 years, and all of a sudden, a kind of Johnny come lately. I mean, obviously, with all respect to the Vilna Gaon and everything, but it's just interesting how this was an established minhag. Now, the Vilna Gaon happens. It's known. The Vilna Gaon felt that this group of Chachamim, who were the tail end of the Rishonim, Rab Terner, the Ma'aril, the Trumas Hadeshin, and the Ogur and the Ma'arivayil, a whole group of people. The Vilna Gaon didn't look at them as Rishonim. He felt that they were a couple hundred years before him, but almost contemporaries, and he's not bound by what they write at all.
But who says they made it up? They just thought of
Correct, but we don't have right. Yeah. That's also true. That's also true.
Putting your sins in the water.
Putting the sins into the water is actually the least spoken about. That's not really what we're doing. It happens to be the pasuk says that not the name is Tashlich. Yes, you have to wonder. You know, the Rebbe would have a field day with this because the name of something always represents its essence. If it's called Tashlich, it must be the essence is throwing the sins in the river. Yet in all the reasons of the poskim, you don't really find that. Nobody says you're actually accomplishing anything. In fact, when you shake out your talus, the Mukabalim say when you shake out your tzitzis, you're not getting rid of the averis. You're getting rid of klippas that adhere to you when you do averis. Like by Kiddush Levana, when someone sins, so evil energy cleaves to you, so you want to get rid of that. The averis themselves, you have to do tshuva.
But it's still very
right, but it's funny to know that the name is called Tashlich, but you don't find actually that's really that's actually what you're doing.
Maybe it's like foundational.
Or maybe they didn't want to say it openly. They didn't want to, I don't know. That no one should think that you're actually Yaitza just going there.
If you go back to the part where they were concerned about what the Goyim are looking at, you think
Yeah,
that they were
there's-
concerned about the practice that the Goyim have of going into a river and doing baptism? That they didn't want it
That's
to
like
appear?
that's like mikveh. That's like putting someone in mikveh.
Well, okay. Good point.
Same thing as
Okay,
mikveh.
okay.
Just there they're closed and here they're no closed. You know? Anyhow, okay, so you see that an innocent minhag like Tashlich is not all of a sudden not so simple. I'll give you another example. Eating milchiks on Shavuos. The Ramah quotes it. It goes back to the Maram of Rottenburg. The Reb Meir of Rottenburg, the great Rishon, spoke how in the Chumash you find a hint to having milchiks on Shavuos. He was the end of the Bali Tesis. He passed away in the end of the 1200s. So he's also towards the end. No, not like, you know. Anyhow, so for hundreds of years, people are reading milchiks. Until a great rabbi comes on the scene in the early 1600s. Rabbi Avram Chaim Shur was his name. A very prominent family, Shur. He had a brother known as Ephraim Zalman Shur. Is the Zayd of Ephraim Zalman Margolis. Ephraim Zalman Shur is known as the Tvu Ashur, one of the greatest geniuses of the last 500 years. Anyway, he had a brother who was big stuff too. Rabbi Avram Chaim Shur. He was a rabbi in today's western Ukraine area. And he passes away in the early 1630s. And he wrote some very important Sfarim on Gemara. The Torah Chaim is his big sefer. He was a student of the Maharsha. Okay, so he was a Talmud of the Maharsha. He was a big guy. And he writes that, wait a second, he says, there's a custom to eat milchiks on Shavuos. He says, I have two rayas from Gemara that the custom has to be abolished. He says, don't you know the Gemara in Pesachim that Rav Yosef said, if not for this day of Shavuos, how many Yosefs would there be in the marketplace? The famous statement. If not for Shavuos that we were given the Torah and I was able to learn, I would just be another Joe in the marketplace. And Rav Yosef said, because it's such a happy day, please bring me the best calves you could find and let's have a meal of flesh. He's eating flesh. That's proof number one. Proof number two is a Mishnah in Masechta Chulin. You're not allowed to shecht a mother and a baby animal, even a kosher animal with kosher shchita. You can't do it. Oisoi the espanoi, it and its son, really means the mother and the child. You can't shecht on the same day. And so what if you sell animals? Every time someone buys an animal, oh, I sold the mother before, go find out if the guy... You don't have to make such arrangements. 4 times a year, you have to expect that whoever buys is buying to shecht immediately, and then you do have to warn the second buyer that go find out from the first guy. And the 4 times, one of them is the day before Rosh Hashanah, one is the day before Shavuos, one is Erev Pesach, and Erev Shmini Atzeres. Those are the 4 times. Not even Erev Sukkot. People kept the good meat actually for Simchas Torah, not the first days of Sukkot. Which, by the way, if a couple of years ago we had a shir upstairs about if you have to have flesh on Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Yosef Karo has in his sefer Magid Meisharim, which is what everything he was taught by the Malach, the Magid, or at least a chunk of it. In Parshas Nitzavim, the Magid tells him that just eat milchiks. And when Ezra said, Ichlu mashmani mushtu mamtakim, have fatty foods and drink, what that means is butter, you know, and cheesecake, right, and a cappuccino. Or something sweet, something sweet, a caramel milkshake. But don't eat flesh. And everybody asks, what about this Mishnah that says the day before Rosh Hashanah is one of the 4 times that you have to assume anyone buying an animal is shechting for meat? In fact, Reb Chaim of Volozhin asked, this is Mamash Akasha, it seems like the Beis Yosef forgot about this Mishnah. And everybody asked, what do you mean? The Beis Yosef was the master of Mishnayos. Not just that. The Malach that taught him was the soul of the Mishnayos. The Malach identifies numerous, I am the soul of the Mishnah. So how could it be that the Malach would teach him something against the Mishnah? And we had a whole shir and we gave a whole explanation about it and to answer that. The answer was that it depends on the person. That Rosh Hashanah is not a chag. If it was a chag, there would be mitzvah v'samachta b'chagecha, and simcha always entails flesh and wine. The halacha is Rosh Hashanah is not a chag. It doesn't have the status of a festive Yom Tov. Now, even if you want to say you can't fast, which itself is a debate, but let's say you have to celebrate. How? For most people, it's with flesh and wine. But because it's not an obligation, it doesn't say chag, a righteous person can abstain from that. So the Mishnah is saying the fact is most people would eat flesh, so if you sell an animal, you got to be cautious.
But didn't you start by saying that we keep the minhagim, that for hundreds of years, so if the minhag of the community is...
The minhag, no, but there was always a minhag of the minority. There was always a minority that didn't indulge in Rosh Hashanah.
Jews make such good lawyers.
Exactly. Anyhow, but okay, fine. But back to our discussion. One of the 4 days is Erev Shavuos. So the Torah Chaim asks, if you're meant to be eating milchiks on Shavuos, then I could tell you this is one of the times of the year where flesh is eaten the least. How could this be one of the 4 days that when you sell meat, you have to tell the person, I sold the mother? For sure, the first day of Sukkot is more flesh going on, and that's not on the list, and this is. It must be, he says, the minhag of milchiks is a nice idea.
Milchiks is by day. By night you eat meat.
Okay, so he says, though, how much meat is eaten by night. On the first day Sukkot, people eat meat by night and by day. But that's not, Erev Sukkot is not one of the times that you have to tell the buyer, oh, I just sold another animal. Although more meat is eaten there than on Shavuos if it's just the first.
Rosh Hashanah.
So Rosh Hashanah is there. Rosh Hashanah is there. It is there. Rosh Hashanah is one of the 4 days. So he says, listen, that's taka minhag. He says it's fitting to be mavatal. Cancel the custom because of the story of Rav Yosef eating flesh, because of this Mishnah. He says, you see that from the Tanoim and the Amoraim, there was no such thing. He says, a cute thing that was created later, and it's dismiss it. With all the good reasons, dismiss it. See? Anyhow, let's continue.
Thousands of years of Judaism, because they didn't know those questions.
Because we had
all the people who didn't know his question. Comes 200 years
On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. You're supposed to go to a caver. There's an old minhag, actually comes from the Maharil as well. It comes from the Maharil that on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and it's also brought, if you can, on Erev Yom Kippur, to go to a Beis HaKvaros, to a caver. In the Litvische world, what do they do by a caver? They do what the Maharil says to do. You daven to God. You don't address the person buried there. We once had a shiur on this years ago. I don't know where the recording went. But the Poskim said you can't address the deceased. That could be a violation of Doire Shalamesim, seeking out the one that's dead. But it's you talk to the Eibishter, and maybe this person will decide to daven on your behalf. If it's a tzaddik, then it's a porthole, it's a gateway to heaven, it's a great place to daven, etc., etc. Or if it's a tzaddik, you could say, Eibishter, help me b'schus the person that's here, etc. But then, if you look at the minor lashon that we have, when you go to the oil, so much of it you're talking to the... So the Pri Megadim 250 years ago quotes and says, I know people are against addressing the deceased, but here you have, according to the author of this minor lashon, apparently it's not a problem. So Chassidim, so the Chassidim, when we go to a tzaddik, we address the tzaddik. In the Litvische world, many of them would forget about, frown upon it. The Chaye Adam, Rabbi Avram Danziger, who was a student of the Vilna Gaon, the Chaye Adam writes, it's Doire Shalamesim, your mom is seeking out. He says, no, before Rosh Hashanah you should go. You should go to the Beis HaKvaros. He says, but don't talk to I don't care who's buried there. You push Doire Shalamesim. So you have something that for Chassidim, going to a place of a tzaddik and communing with the tzaddik, Hishtadchus, prostrate, commune with the tzaddik is considered a very holy service. And by the Chaye Adam, it's Pashat, a major Avei of Doire Shalamesim. Anyway, we had a whole shiur discussing, there's lots of explanations, but I just want to show that...
The point of the Arizal telling to Chaim Vital to avoid going in and walk only outside the cemetery. He wanted to go to
the Arizal in Eretz Yisrael went with his walking stick and he said, here is buried so. He identified many places where tzaddikim are buried. Why did he do that? The Gemara in Bab Metzia says there was Reish Lakish, was it? Have a Metzayin Ma'arta D'Rabbanon. There was an Amira that went around showing where different rabbis were buried. So the simple reason is a kohen wouldn't accidentally walk there, but that tzaddik shouldn't be a cause for a kohen to become impure. But Rabbi Yaakov and others say we're talking tzaddikim. There's no impurity by tzaddikim. No, that. Yeah, that's how we get to Rabbi Chia. Yeah, and so others say no. It was pasha so people could know where to daven. Like Kolev went to the office and he spoke to them. Avoisai bakshu alai rachamim. The Gemara in Sotah says very clear. Right, so that's our raya. That's the our raya that we have. Anyhow, so they have responses to that. Okay, fine. Okay, let's begin Kaparos. Okay, so join me in number 4. In number 4, the number 4 is the Tur. So you're going back 700 years ago. The Tur passes away in around 1340 roughly. So 700 years ago he writes, Yesh Mekaymitz, there are places that have a minhag to shecht a chicken for a kapara. V'chein yesh b'tshuvas ha'go'enim. Says the Tur, you know where the source of kaparas comes from? It goes back to the times of the go'enim. Now the go'enim span about 400 years of time. How early does it go back? It goes back to one of the very first go'enim, Rav Sheshna or Sheshna or Seshwan, Sheshna or Sheshna. He was a gaon in Surah. He passed away in the 680s. In the 680s, okay, 1500, 1400 years ago. He passed away in the 680s because before him was the Rabbanon Savaroim for about 100, 150 years or so. Anyhow, so this Rav Sheshna, he actually has a tshuva, famous tshuva, about not wearing tefillin chol hamoed, which is also a major point of contention between Chassidim and Misnagdim. We had a shir about that as well in the Kabbalah versus Halacha. But he has a tshuva, 1400 years ago, not to wear tefillin chol hamoed. He has a letter about taking a chicken and shechting it before Yom Kippur to atone for you. Now it happens to be that some historians say, yes, there is an old letter, but it's not from him. It doesn't go all the way back to Rav Sheshna in the 600s. No, it's from the 800s, from a much later authority. You know, there's always the modern scholars that, this right, it can't go all the way back. But, it's definitely, no, one of the rayas is, how come the Tur just says, V'chein yesh b'tshuvas ha'goyim. If it goes all the way back, he should have said Rav Sheshna at the beginning of the Goinim. It sounds like, it's from the later Goinim. Yeah, what type of proof is that? No, it doesn't. But he continues, this v'shesha'altem, so this Gaon, whoever the Gaon was asked, Sha'anu noigin lishchet erev Yom Kippurim tarnagol. The minhag was to shecht erev Yom Kippur a chicken. Ve'einanu yoidin minhag zeh lama. And this community asked this Gaon, assuming it's Rav Sheshna, you see, talking in the 600s, what's the purpose of the minhag? So that means the minhag was already widespread. For so long, people had already forgotten the reason behind it. And they asked him why. He said, Imishum Tamura, if it's just to have an exchange, that this thing should die in my place, why choose a chicken? Choose an animal, choose a chaya. You could choose a deer, you could choose a goat, you could choose a cow. I mean, why chicken? Why a chicken? So Rav Sheshna responds, Ha vadai kushis hakakasha. And let me explain. Elosh yesh bo shnei tom. There's 2 reasons. One reason is that a tarnagol motzer b'bayis yoser mikol b'chai. People have chickens in their backyard. And it's relatively cheap. Relatively cheap. It's hard for people to tell people to get their hands on a behemoth. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, you had to bring a carbon. But here, for more than any other behemoth chaya, va'oif, chickens are the most readily available. Va'oid, he says, yesh taku b'mekaymas ashirim. You have wealthy places that they make a tmur. They do the substitution with elim, with rams. And the ikr bali karnayim, and they dafka want things which have horns. Dumus elo shel Yitzchak v'inu olav v'shalom. There were those that dafka wanted an animal with horns to represent the ram of Yitzchak. Now, what's the connection between that and Yom Kippur? Because the Chidah is gang ho that Akedah happened on Yom Kippur. And he has a Zohar, and there's other sources that. So as much as we talk about the Akedah Rosh Hashanah, which is one opinion, another opinion says no, it's Dafka Yom Kippur. So he says, you see, so what's his point over here? He says, B'chlal, it's not dover kol. It doesn't have to dafka be a chicken taka. It doesn't have to be. You know, the people asked him, why dafka chicken? Doesn't matter. There were places that they took rams and horned animals. Va'oid, we heard from Chachamim Morishoinim. We heard from the early Chachamim.
Who's he referencing?
I don't know. Probably the Rabbanis Savaroim, which was a group of rabbis between the Amoraim and the Goinim. There happens to be, there's a machlokes, Sha'afapi, even though Shebehema Domel Yokarim Yosim Betarnagol, some say even though an animal is more expensive than a chicken, which would lead you to think it's more preferable, nonetheless a chicken is more preferable because it's called a gever. A gever is a rooster. Like the Gemara asks in Yuma, what does it mean, Kara gever? The gever is called. Rav Sheila says the chicken is called. The rooster. A gever, so because, it's called a gever like a man. The kivin sheshmoi gever, so tmuras gever begever tvei mahani umali. You want to exchange a gever for a gever. So that's why we dafka want a tarnago. So one reason is either it's more available. I would have said it's cheaper. He says fakert. The fact that the animals are more expensive is the reason to choose the animals. You would think maybe the minhag is to be easier on people. He says no. That would be a reason to go for the animal. But the chicken is better because of its name. And he says v'kach regilin. This is how we do it. The kach regilin Khan. He lived in Surah in Bavel. The shliach tzibur holds the chicken. You don't do it yourself. This is not for everyone to do on their own. You don't hold your own chicken. The chazan takes the shliach tzibur. Maniach yodai al roishay. Right, you go past the guy, yeah? He puts maniach yodai al roishay. He puts his hand on the head, v'noitloi. Who's putting his head? So that's called smicha. When you put your hand on the head of the chicken, you're doing smicha. When you do a smicha, when you lean on a carbon, we're going to see a major debate between the levush and the taz. If you're supposed to do smicha today on the kaparos, we'll get to there on the next paper. But over here, the minhag says, yeah, maniach yodai al rosh. You should put your hand, v'noitloi, and you take it. Umaniach al rosh hamiskaper. It's still the chazan. He puts it on the head of the miskaper. He doesn't say above. I don't know. What does al rosh mean? On the head or above the head? Okay, you could use your imagination. And he says, zeh tachas zeh. This is in place of this. Zeh chiluv zeh in place of this. Zeh mechul. So this is the Tur quoting this, okay?
Why don't we say we don't bring like a behemoth because we don't choose a chay? Because a behemoth would look like a
that's very good point. Very good point. Now,
Pretty good.
so the Tur quotes this. Look at number 5 on the left. You won't believe this. It's a Rashi in Masechta Shabbos. Rashi quotes it's got to be one of the most bizarre minhagim you'll come across from the Middle Ages. The Gemara there is discussing if you have a rock on Shabbos, you're in the loo and there's no tissues around, and you get a little rock over there which has grass growing on it. So you pick up the rock. The problem is when you have a rock on the ground and there's grass growing on the rock, that grass is nourishing from the soil which surrounds it. It is. And when you pull it away, it's kind of being toilish if you're separating and detaching it from its life source. And the Gemara says you're allowed to. So the Gemara says, what about high parpissa? Parpissa was a type of plant pot, which had holes in it, full of soil, and through the holes, the soil in it nourished from the soil on the earth. Are you allowed to just pick that up on Shabbos? Forget about muksa, but as far as detaching from the ground. So then it should be the same thing as the rock with the grass on it. So Rashi says, what's this parpissa? Look what Rashi says in number 5. It's Shabbos daf pei aleph. Otzitz nokuf. It was a plant pot which has holes. Shezaru boy that they planted in it. Ubetshuvas ha'go'onim matzasi. I found the letter of the go'onim. Look what he says. Sha'oisin chaislis. You make pots. Mekapos tmorim from lulav leaves. We're in number 5, the 4th line. Umemalin oisam offer. You put earth in it and zevel behema and fertilizer. And 22 or 15 days before Rosh Hashanah, so 2 or 3 weeks before Yom Tov, oisin kol echad ve'echad l'shem kol cotton v'ktana shebebayis. You make one of these plant pots for each kid in the house, one for each boy, one for each girl. V'zoynim l'steichin, you put pula mitzri or kitnia, some type of beans, and you call it a purfisa, and it starts to grow. You leave it outside, right? Erev Rosh Hashanah, you go out on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and each kid picks up his plant pot. He waves it around his head 7 times, and he says, this is in place of me, and you throw it into the river. It's like a mix of Kaparos and Tashlich.
Yeah.
And it's Rosh Hashanah.
Do you know what the word actually means, or it's just?
No, it's just it's a word. It's just not from another language. It's a mix of Tashlich and Kaporos.
Kaporos is considered Otzitz Nokov?
Well, it had holes in it. Right. It's Otzitz Nokov because it was full of holes. So this is like, this is a Tshuvas HaGa'onim. You know, it's not the same letter that Tur is quoting at all, but it's a similar idea. There's no chicken, here it's vegetation. Which, by the way, those that came out against Kaparos and said use other things like money, they would quote this Rashi. You don't have to wave chickens in your head, you can wave vegetables. You can take a cabbage, wave the cabbage around your head 7 times. It's good.
This is better than money. It's live. It's living.
Right, it's living. Yeah, exactly. That's the idea, exactly. And there's a shaila about fish, fine. But you see the same word, zeh tachazeh, zeh chalifosi, zeh tumurasi, and then you chuck it in the river. You don't give it to a poor person like we do with our chickens. You chuck it. You just chuck it. There's no benefit from these beans. These beans get thrown in the river, and I don't know what river water creatures are able to eat those beans. They're not ripe or anything, right? They just get thrown out. So there has to be a destruction. In order for a real kapara, something needs to be destroyed. So you say the chicken dies. But you don't have to throw out the dead chicken. The chicken dies, that's the destruction. And then the chicken flesh could be eaten. But here, if you just give it to somebody, there's been no destruction. Only your love. Maybe that's why there's... Anyway, fine. Join me, we're just starting. Come to number 6. Number 6, Rabbi Yosef Kaira. You're not going to believe he was one of the most vehement detractors of the Kaporos Minhag. Yeah. Gung-ho against Kaporos. In number 6, he's going on the tour. So, the tour quotes this whole long letter that we saw in number 4. In number 6, the Beis Yosef of Taka, it's from the Mordechai in Masechta Yuma. The Mordechai was a student of the Maram of Rothenburg. He was a Kohen. He was in the end of the 1200s. He was killed in a horrible massacre, the Rindfleisch massacres, in 1298 in southern Germany. They say about 25,000 Yidden were murdered. And the Mordechai quotes the custom of Kaporos with the chicken. And if you want to get the exact word, where did the Tur get his exact wording from? It's from the Rosh, who was a friend of the Mordechai. The two of them were both students of the Maram of Rothenburg. The Rosh writes it also in Masechta Yuma, and a little bit is in the Mordechai. Fine. Minhag ze kosev also in the Tashlich, who was later. And it says, Shenoigim likach tarnagol for a male, a rooster for a male, and a chicken for a female. Says the Beis Yosef, Harajba kosev b'tshuva. There's a letter of the Rashba. Be'inyan hakapara, about kaparas that they do for kids on Erev Yom Kippur. Says the Rashba, this is a minhag in our city. Although I heard from Anoshim Hagunim, from good people, from proper people, that in Germany, that all Rabbanei Ashkenaz do this, I also heard Rabbeinu Haigon was asked, Va'amr Shekei Nagu, that it's the minhag, and Rav Haigon is hundreds of years before the Rashba. Im calls, and nonetheless, says the Rashba, Monati aminhag hazeh me'irenu, I threw this custom out of my town of Barcelona. Says the Beis Yosef, it's not just him. If you look in the Sefer Orchos Chaim, he quotes the Ramban. The Ramban Oyster, the Ramban forbade it. The Ramban forbade Kaporos. Mishum darchei ha'emori. What's darchei ha'emori? Darchei ha'emori means following the pagan customs. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah has a whole daf Yudalad, speaking about goyim who would purchase white chickens specifically for their sacrifices. And the Gemara discusses you can't supply these goyim with these chickens because you're enabling them, aiding them in their avodah zarah. You're over putting a stumbling block in front of it.
Law, you can't be
That's doing business, and this is an entire year. This is an entire year you can't sell them. And the Gemara discusses, what if the guy comes to the market and you sell white and black chickens and whatever, and he says, Oh, give me 10 chickens, 3 of these, 3 of these, 3 of these. Do you have to suspect? All these different questions. If the guy mentions, what if he doesn't say the word white chicken? Give me 10 chickens. But he assumes you'll give him a mix. But he didn't mention white chicken. They go, each case, mamash nitty gritty. Because it was a real issue. Singling out white chickens to sacrifice to their idols. I mean, this is Darchi HaMeiri, means following the Goyim's things. The Ramban says, we look for a white chicken to shecht. I mean, this is mamish, a whole daf of Gemara talking about this, what the Goyim did, and we couldn't get anywhere near that with a 10-foot pole, and now it became a custom amongst Yidden. Now you're probably wondering, wait, we're not doing the same thing as the Goyim. They're taking a white chicken and shechting Tavodah Zarah. We're taking a white chicken and shechting it. It's not even a sacrifice. We're using the meat. Either we're going to eat it, or you give it to a poor man. But it's still apparently close enough. It's close enough. So we're going to see the words of the Rashba inside. So the point is, though, that you have two of the greatest Rishonim. These aren't just random people. The Ramban and the Rashba, they were both Sephardim, it's true. Two of the greatest Rishonim who... The Ramban assered it. Okay, the Rashba, we're going to see his words, doesn't go so far to say it's usher, but he does say he abolished the custom.
What about Hagai? You missed that Gemara?
But the Rashba attests, it goes back to Rav Haigon. I told you, many say it goes 300 years before Rav Haigon to Rav Sheshnagon. Not just that, we see Rashi in number 5 quotes a letter. Now, Rashi number 5 may be irrelevant. There's no chicken over there. The whole Ramban of Darchi HaMeiri was by a chicken. Taking cabbages and putting it over your head, that's maybe Stama Mishugas. The truth is, though, that Rashi had a student called Reb Simcha of Vitry. Vitry is a city in France, near Troy, where Rashi was. Reb Simcha was a student of Rashi, and he later became a Mechutin with Rashi. And he wrote the Machzor Vitry, a very important, we had lots of halachas. He had a son named Shmuel, who married Rashi's granddaughter, Miriam, the sister of Rabbeinu Tam. And they had a son, the Ri, the famous Ri, the great Ri. The great Ri was an Einikul of this Machzor Vitry, yeah. The Machzor Vitry says, our custom is we take a chicken on Erev Yom Kippur and we shecht it and we say this should be in our place. And the Machzor Vitry says, do you know why we do it? It's to resemble the Seir LaAzazel. The Seir LaAzazel, the Yidden would put all their Averis in it and then kill it. So that's what we do. Now you should know the Seir LaAzazel itself is a very mysterious practice. We're going to see a very strange levush about it on the next page. But the Machzor Vitry relates to that's why we do it on Yom Kippur and not Rosh Hashanah. Or else we could have done in Rosh Hashanah like Rashi's Minhag. It's dafka to emulate the Seir LaAzazel, but he brings the chicken. So the custom in France was chicken. The Tur quotes chicken from the Gaonim. And then you have the Ramban and the Rashba in Spain, all out against it. Rabbi Yosef Kaira quotes them in his commentary on the Tur. When Rabbi Yosef Kaira wrote the Shulchan Aruch, in Siman 605, the heading of the Siman was, there is a custom to take a chicken on Erev Yom Kippur, Minhag shtusu. It's a foolish custom. In the first print, he wrote a foolish custom. All prints after those words were removed. But what we do have is we have in number 8, this we still have, says Rabbi Yosef Kaira in the Shulchan Aruch, the custom to make a kapara on Erev Yom Kippur, to shecht a chicken for every male and to say psukim, yesh limnoya haminhag, you should stop it. Stop it. Shulchan Aruch. If you're a Shulchan Aruch Jew, you don't do kaparos. The funny thing is, Rabbi Avadia Yosef, who always goes with the Bet Yosef, Avadia Yosef didn't come out against kaparos.
So today, who doesn't?
What is he switching?
In Taimon, because the Yemenites said the Rambam doesn't bring any. The Rambam's not doing any kaparos.
What is he switching?
Rambam's not doing
Versus
kaparos?
just Cholim, then
The Rambam doesn't mention kaparos anywhere.
What about the frum world today? Who does it?
Everyone does it. I'll tell you. There were those. Okay, hold on. We'll see. Join me in number 7. What?
What is he change? First he says just Hakol ben Zachar, and the first time he says Zachar and the Kevas.
That is quoting from the Tashlich. That he was just quoting from the Tashlich. Look at number 7. Let's look at the letter of the Rashba. Join me in number 7. Says the Rashba, Kosav Mar, you wrote to me that you saw Masha Shafti Ani, when I responded about the Kaparos, Sha'oisin Luna Orim. So here you see, it seems like it was done for the youth, On Erev Yom Kippur, V'shasa'arti Ani, what? Yeah. Also, here Taka says that you heard that I answered it. And you were happy. It pleased you. Va'ata moisif oid, and you went even further. You went even more extreme. To say shekarav loimish ashchita psula. You wanted to say this guy. The Rashba passes away in 1310. So you're going back a while. So you had zealots then. This zealot is writing to the Rashba that I think anyone that shechs a kapor, you can't even eat. Forget about giving the flesh to poor people. You have to chuck it out. Ashchita psula. It's possible. It's like someone shoichet l'shem chatosa. It's a Gemara in Masech Chulin. If someone shechts an animal, a random animal, and you say, "Oh, this is my carbon chatos," you take stam an animal. You take a goat.
For a carbon?
You take stam an animal that you got from the farm, and I'm shechting it for a chatos, and you shecht it, right? You can't eat it. It looks like you're bringing carbonos outside the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara there discusses the difference if it is or if it isn't, right? But let's say it is. Let's say it's a goat. Let's say, or it's a lamb, right? Anyhow, so look at the Rashba. Ani matzasi minhag zeh pashut bire. Says the Rashba. Listen, I live in Barcelona. Everyone in Barcelona was doing it. They were doing the Kaparos. Im shardvam, with other things that they did. You know what he did? He says, let me tell you what they were doing in Barcelona. This is like the Dark Ages. They would shecht an old chicken lekapara alanar to atone for a kid, hayulad, for a baby. When a baby was born, they would shecht an old chicken. The they would cut the head off the chicken. The toilin harosh, they would hang the head with his feathers. The pesach habayis on the entrance of the doorway, mshum with garlic. You can imagine what smelled worse. I don't know, the garlic. Anyhow, between the two of them, no, this had nothing to do with Yom Kippur. This was stam a medieval practice. Va'avolim harbe, he says lots of mishigasan. Sheniru be'ena kedarchemer. They for sure came from the goyim. This was superstitious voodoo witchcraft activities from the goyim. He said, "V'dochakti al zeh harbe." I pushed very much, and with the help of God, my words were heard. V'loy nishar mikol zeh. None of this remains at all by rain. Nothing of this remains in Barcelona. But what about Kaporos and Yom Kippur? He said, I heard from Anoshim Hagunim Ma'oid. I heard from very upright people from Germany, who are now with me in Barcelona. There are people with me in Barcelona, upright people that come from Germany. And they told me that all the Rabbonim of Germany do this on Erev Yom Kippur. And they shecht for kapara, ivzin, geese, and tarnagolin, and chicken. I also heard Rav Hai Gon was asked about this, and he said, yes, that's the minhag.
Last.
Rav Hai Gon was the last one. He passes away in 1038. Right. So from the beginning to the end of the Gaon, they're all doing this. Nonetheless, says the Rashba, Manati, I refrained from this custom being followed through in our city. He says, but nonetheless, I'm not going to passel the meat. I'm not going to passel the shchitza. Like what Moshe was saying. Loi passel el sheicha the shem dover another v'anidiv. If you shechted something that could have been brought as a carbon, then the onlooker might think, oh, you're actually bringing a carbon. And the dafka only fits tmimim, but bali mumin. It's not a problem because anyone that sees know that this is not a real oiler or shlamim. It's just havoy. It's to the guy stam hacking a chinik. And therefore, since you don't bring a carbon from a chicken, no one's no one's going to make a mistake to think you're bringing carbonos here in Barcelona because you can't bring a carbon from a chicken farm. Lefichach.
Never heard of geese though. Who does that?
And yeah, so he says that I paskin my sefer Torah Sabayis that if you do it, the shchita is okay. You're allowed to eat it. But he said I threw the custom out of Barcelona. Okay, let's go weiter. So you have the Ramban who's against it. You have the Rashba. You have the Shulchan Aruch. That's big. It's not small. It's big. Look at the Bach in number 9. the Bach, he says, B'tshuvas HaRashba, the Rashba Kosov, he wanted to be Mavato the Minhag, because of Darchi HaMari, because of the path of Goyim. And so the Orchos Chaim quotes from the Ramban. Says the Bach, Ein Ono Choshim L'Divrayim. We're not going to be concerned to the Ramban and the Rashba to be Mavatal Minhag HaGoyim. This is a custom that predates the Ramban and the Rashba by centuries. As great as they were, we're not going to listen to them to override a minhag of the Goyim. Mikol Makom, nonetheless, he says, I do have my own concerns. Nira be'enai, I want to be mavatal a certain custom. Shenagu liknis tarnagolim levonim. We always look for white chickens, right? Bedomim yikarim, and even though they're more expensive. Because matzuke, look at the next page on the right side, b'maharil. The Maharil says you want white, because white is pure of sin. If your sins are red like, then kashela yalbinu, they'll become white like snow. Says the Bach, if you are specific for a white chicken, bazeh vaday yesh lochush ktsas l'darchei ameri. If you're looking for a white chicken specifically, then I hear the Ramban. Then that mamash looks, that's exactly the pagan practice. You can't do it. You can't do it. He says, "V'ulai, maybe even the Maharil who speaks about the white one, loy nota lovan, ela kishloi hutzrich lishol acharov." It could be when the Maharil spoke about a white chicken, is talking about if a punk comes your way. He was only talking if you didn't have to search for it. Kagoin, for example, they sold to him a white chicken, or he bought a white chicken amongst other tarnugim. In other words, he went to the thing and he sees that there's different chickens. He could choose black, he could choose white. He chose white. But if you to go to a different marketplace because this one only had other colors, that would be Darchi Hameri. And he quotes the Gemara Avodah Zarah that I mentioned. Avoladaktik, but to search and to question where's the white one and to spend extra money for the white, it's Darchi Hameri, and this is what I received from my master, my father.
Who's his father?
Rabbi Sirkus. So the Bach says that the Ramban and the Rashba, we're not going to listen to them over the Go'enim, but you only take the white chicken if it's readily available. You don't look for it. What?
The white chickens.
Yeah, Bach, yeah. Let's go.
The chickens that we get are the cheapest breed.
The white chickens. Bichlal, yeah. Try if they're not dead before they come to us. We'll see about that. I look at number 11 for a second, just to show you how important the Rashba is, that his words have to, to understand why the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Kaida went with the Rashba on this one. Look at number 11. This is from Rabbi Yehuda Zerachia Azulai, a relative of the Chidah. He's in the 1800s. He was a big Gaon, a Sephardish in Eretz Yisrael. He says in number 11, he says like this: we will not leave the Rashba and take the Rivosh, who was another Rishon a generation later, because he says, Kaimelon, we hold the halacha follows the Rashba against the Rivosh, even when the Rashba is lenient. And you have to know, he says, the Maharshtam, Reb Shmuel di Modina was the rabbi in Saloniki in the 1500s. He writes that rule, the Rashba trumps over the Rivosh. Now that's not such a big deal, because the Rashba was earlier, fine. But he says, don't you know, Mashaheid Maran Olav, do you know what Rabbi Yosef Kaira said about the Rashba? Look what, if all the Chachmei Yisrael were on a scale, and the Rashba was on the other side, he would outweigh everybody. Rabbi Yosef Kai, this is the only source that I know of we have to this testimony. This is written in the 1800s, so I guess for 300 years this was given over orally. Now you understand, Rabbi Yosef Kaira said the Rashba outweighs everybody else, and now you understand why Kaparos, he was so swayed by the Rashba. He says, Reb Shmuel di Medina from Saloniki writes that Rabbeinu Agadol Reb Yosef Taitachak, who was a great Rosh Hashiva in Saloniki, after he was thrown out of Spain, that a few times when he would see the opinion of the Rashba, he would take the Rashba's opinion against all the other Chachamim. And Shmuel di Medina says in another place that he believes if the Rivosh would have ever seen that the Rashba says different, the Rivosh would never argue against him. As you see from this is Rabbi Zulai giving all these sources that the Rashba was king of the Rishonim. So it gives, helps understand why Rabbi Yosef Kaira would have been swayed by the Rashba, although you have these letters of the Gaonim.
Maybe the Rashba only did it because he was already working on the Baal Shem, all these other things.
Could be. I think it's also because of the Ramban. Now the Rashba doesn't quote the Ramban. The Rashba was a student of the Ramban. Right. They both use the words Darchi Amay. The Rashba should have quoted the Ramban in his letter. That would have definitely bolstered his. I don't know. Look at number 2. There are tshuvas where the Rashba says about certain halachas, I feel very clearly this way, but people told me in the name of the Ramban XYZ. The Rashba says, I don't know, I never heard it, I didn't see it, doesn't make sense to me, I wouldn't. But he says, but if the Ramban says it, then that's it, I close. But he says, how come I never heard it? Anyway, let's go.
With the Ramban ever or no?
Yeah. And I look at number 12. Number 12 is the Levush. The Levush of Mordechai Yafa, he's a student of the Ramah. He says, "V'yesh ermim." Some say, okay, we're almost done. There's in the end we have a Maharal, a beautiful Maharal. You don't want to miss the Maharal. Says the Levush. Some say yesh limnoya aminig hazeh. The Levush writing this 500, 400, 500 years ago. He says there are some say forget about Kaparos. They say Adarab, it's an Isser. V'yesh bo mishum darchi amay. It's following the path of the Goyim. And they say like this. If mishum karbon, if you're trying to emulate a carbon, then you got the wrong thing. A chicken's also for a carbon. So what are you even doing? You're not even emulating a carbon. The oid, and it's even worse, you're shechting it bachutz. You're very far from the temple. It looks like you're shechting kodshim bachutz. So they have 2 kashas. Number 1, if you're trying to emulate a carbon, what's the chicken? Number 2, how could you emulate a carbon? So Levush says, Faket, both questions answer each other. We're not trying to emulate. He says, Va'ani oimer adra b'faket, he and his sentence, it answers each other. Mishum zeh nogu, that's why we took a chicken. We took things which you can't bring a carbon from, in order that people shouldn't mistake it's actually a carbon. And they're going to start sanctifying animals, and they'll shecht it here, out of Eretz Yisrael, out of the Beis HaMikdash, and eat it. Therefore we take something that everyone knows it's not a real carbon. So why do we do it? You'll never believe it. Ella, look what he says in number 12, 5 lines from the bottom. The reason you do Kaporos is to satiate the Satan. Kedei lahasbiya einay shel Rasha, to satiate the eye of the Rasha, the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, the Malach HaMavis, right? That's a lashon from the Gemara and Baba Basra. It's all the same guy. He wants to destroy the world, and he's mekatrik, he's a lawyer, he's a prosecutor. Al Abrius, in order we should be given over to his hand. But when we shecht, if everyone shechts an animal to die in my place, and you think that it's like I shechted myself, right? That this should have happened to me, but now it happened to the animal. So then the Satan feels that he got a little bit of the blood. He got blood. So he's not mekatrik kolkach. He said it's just like the seir hamishtalech la'azazel. I told you the Machzer Vitri compares that, but it's a bit of a different thing. Simply the seir la'azazel died, it carried our sins, it was an atonement. So too you shech the chicken, it's an atonement. What the Levush is saying is, you know why we sent the seir to the Azazel? It was also to satiate the Satan. The Rishonim talk, exactly, to shut the Satan up on Yom Kippur. In order he shouldn't disturb what goes on in the Beis HaMikdash, we give what's called Sheichad l'Satan. The Radvaz has a letter why the tefillin, the little white thing that sticks, that little hair comes from an egel, from a calf. He says the Satan wants to get in the way of tefillin, but if he sees you have a bit of the egel azov over there, he sees every time God sees it, there's a reminder. The Satan's like, you know what, wear your tefillin. There are many times we say this. You want to just give the Satan, give the dog a bone. The Levush is saying that's why we do the Sir Lot. That's why we do Kaparos. That's why we do it. Kei niruli the fakir dafka because it's shady. That's the reason why we could do it. Dafka because it's like Darchi and Murray. What are you doing? This is a dafka because of all the question marks. That's actually it's a fascinating Levush. Look in the Radvaz right underneath the number 15. The Radvaz says he thinks he knows why the Rashba forbade it. The Radvaz is a rabbi in Egypt in the 1500s. Val Inyan Shchit. I mean, he was born in Spain, and then as a kid he was a refugee, part of the expulsion. Val Inyan Shchita Satanica, about shechting chickens on Erev Yom Kippur for kapara ala na'orim. Again, he says for the kids. He says the Olam does it. Even though he's a Sephardi, and the Ramban and the Rashba was Sephardim, but he says the fact is the minhag is to do it. But the Rashba said you can't. And the Radvaz is a big fan of the Rashba. He said like this. He said, I think if you give the chicken to a poor person, so what are you doing? You're shechting a chicken and giving the meat to a poor person. How's that darchi ha'mayri? It's stucker. Even the Rashba would agree it's not Darchi HaMeri. It's like if you give tzedakah to a poor person and you do it on condition your son will survive. The Gemara says in Pesachim, it's a beautiful thing. You're tzaddik gomer. I'm shechting the chicken, giving to the poor, and this should be an atonement for my sins. What's the difference? I didn't see anybody opposing it. So he thinks if you give it to a poor person, it changes the whole thing. It's an act of tzedakah, and you want to gain from it. It's just like giving a tzedakah to a poor person. Amanas that your son should become healed. What? According to the Vush, it doesn't say you should throw the. The truth is, we take the intestines. The Alter Rebbe said there was a minhag to take the intestines of the chicken and throw them on the roofs. In order, and the Alter Rebbe says, this also goes back from the Ma'aril, but the Alter Rebbe quotes in the Shulchan Aruch, you have to mention Alter Rebbe at least once, that the minhag was to throw it on the roof so at least birds can come, they can come and enjoy. So we can, before Yom Kippur, we can do an act of kindness to the animal world as well. Yeah, you shecht one, you're doing an act of kindness. I want to tell you something. One of the greatest Kabbalists was Reb Chaim HaKoyen. He's known as the Tur Barekes, the sefer that he wrote in Shulchan Aruch. He was the chief student of Reb Chaim Vital. And he was born after the Arizal passed away, but Reb Chaim Vital outlived the Arizal many decades. And he lived in this guy. He lived in Syria, and that's where he got to know Reb Chaim Vital, and he became a huge. The Tur Barekes is a very important sefer. He says, you know why the Rashba and the Rambam, you know why they had an issue with it? Dafka, because of the custom of throwing the guts on the roof. The throwing the guts on the roof, that was like major superstition. He said it was that activity that threw everybody off. That's what the Tur Barekes says, which is interesting because they don't mention that, and also the reason we do this dafka to show rachamim. This is the time we show compassion before Yom Kippur. According to Tur Barekes, it was dafka that issue that was like the most super. The shechting fine, the throwing it, tossing it all on the roof of the house. That's like the Rashba thing of hanging the head by the front door. That's like that was too much. That's what he says. But the Radvaz says he thinks once you give the chicken to the poor comes an act of tzedakah. Now quickly, hold on. If you look in number 13 and 14, the big poskim that we follow, the Magen Avraham and the Taz, they have their own reservations. We'll be done hopefully within the next 7 minutes. They both have their own reservations by Kaparos. The Magen Avraham says in number 13, Mikol Mokum ein lechazer achar levonim dafka. Don't dafka search for a white one. It's ke'ein darchei meri. That's what the Goyim did, like the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Ella im yizdamen lo'ilov. If you happen to go to the marketplace and there's a white one there, take it. He's quoting the Bach like we saw earlier. Now then he says, im ein lo tawaret, there's no chickens, take a different animal. Some say even fish, right? The Levush says fish. During Corona, lots of people took fish because of the Levush. Okay. Now says the Magen Avraham, venerally, it seems to me, if you don't have a chicken, lo yikach, don't take something which is royalak. Don't take a bird that you could bring a carbon, like a pigeon or a dove. Don't take a bird or an animal that halachically is fit for a carbon, because then it looks like you're makdish kochim. It looks like you're actually really replicating, emulating karbonis and shechting them b'chutz. And then he quotes the Rashi we saw earlier from the Shabbos with the plant pot with the Zroyim. So he quotes it. So he already, the Magen Avraham is the one that sends everybody to that Rashi. But the Magen Avraham says, he says like the Bach, only take white if it's readily available. If you start looking for it, boom, you have the Darchei Meri, you have the Ramban, the Rashba. And then he says, and also if there's no chicken, take something else. Don't take something which actually could be brought as a carbon. Look at number 14, is the Taz's reservation. There were those that said you're supposed to put your hands on the chicken and rest your hands. Smicha. In fact, that's what we saw in the Torah when he quotes the letter of the Gainim. And the Levush says you do smicha. Says the Taz, even though Dovizeh Betur, yeah, I know the Torah says it, B'Shem HaGainim, Tamua Ma'od Be'enai. How could you do smicha? It looks like you're bringing a carbon outside the correct zone. It looks like you're officially being makdish, you're making an animal holy and you're shechting it outside the right place.
Specifically referring to smicha?
He's talking about smicha. You said it's a chicken. You can't bring a korban from a chicken. Nonetheless, he says, doesn't matter. Don't you know in Hilchos Pesach, you're not supposed to say the night of this flesh is for Pesach. Because it sounds like you're designating it for a korban. And the Ma'aril says you can't do it even on a chicken, which you can't bring a korban Pesach out of. You have to be careful of how you speak. So v'kol shekain kan, so for sure over here, that when you're actually trying to shecht, you're actually shechting it here, right? You're doing a shtickle korban thing. Although it's a chicken, don't do smicha. There's a concern, don't do it. Cain, he's arguing on the Ramah, he's arguing on all the... So the Taz is arguing on the Ga'inim too. The Ga'inim said you do smicha, he says no. The Alter Rebbe quotes this. The Alter Rebbe quotes all of these things. Look at number 16, hold on. Comes the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan is back. The Aruch HaShulchan says about Kaparos. V'chol zeh, number 16. Be'etzem adov. Beforehand, he quoted the reservations of the Magen Avraham, the Taz, and he says how you can get out of it. Ava, with all of our sins, we see the kilkul b'shchita. Says Aruch HaShulchan, you know what happens the night of Kaparos? Good thing there's no sheichtim here, right? I was going to give the shir Thursday night, actually, while they were doing Kaparos over there. He says there's so many Kaparos done at the same time. There's pressure. There's, you're always on the move. People are waiting. The sheichtim aren't mashki. What? Yeah. He's writing this 130 years ago. 140 years ago. The sheichtim are not mashkiach. The sheichtim aren't properly watching. They're tired. They're tired. And they're working hard. And there's lots of treifas coming out. And also the knife. Are they checking the knife properly? And the sheich's hands are getting heavy. Va'ato bizman azeh, he said, mitzvah v'choyve lahamiton. He said we should diminish the kaparos, the amount of kaparos. It's a mitzvah to choyve, to really to knock it down. How could you enter the holy day b'chshash shchita? This is how you enter Yom Kippur with thousands of questionable shchitas. You don't do the chicken a favor. You don't do the person a favor. Who's eating the flesh? And if people eat the flesh when it could not be kosher, what are you doing? He says already in the generations before us, they tried to be mavatalit, and it didn't work because the multitudes are addicted to it like esrog, and even more. You got
What's he throwing?
he throws in esrog. He says,
What does he say about esrog?
No. He doesn't throw out esrog, but he says, okay. At least you should look. He said, you know what? Do Kaparos a few days before Yom Kippur. Spread it out. He says, do you want to do it? This is his eitzah. He wants you to spread it out over a couple days before. And v'limnoya hashmers, don't do early morning Erev Yom Kippur. Right? The Alter Rebbe writes in the Siddur, Dafka, Erev Yom Kippur, early in the morning. And says Aruch HaShulchan, no. The sheikh's hands are heavy then. Now, true, the sheikhim usually shecht very early in the morning, right? Throughout the year. So, don't know why it's such a difference. Maybe in those days it wasn't like that. But nowadays, sheikhim, when they shecht, it's always early morning. So for them, it's the same thing.
Jab at the esrog, I don't understand.
No,
Take a beautiful esrog.
no, it is. No, that's his point. Is people are mixing up their priorities. They think this is an esrog.
No, he's saying dovak is negative.
They're dovig in this like an esrog. They're mixing up their priorities. Yeah. No, he's fine. He's good with the esrog. He's good with the esrog. But so the Aruch HaShulchan again, he comes out against Tashlich. He comes out, and there were other things. But he's Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was a great Rav in Eretz Yisrael, and he was close with Lubavitch. In fact, some of the last questions they had about the Rebbe's life when he was in hospital, about resuscitation, they were sending their questions to Shlomo Zalman. He was a great Rav, a great man. When he was younger, he did Kaporos with the chickens, and then he stopped. He stopped. There are some Sephardish Rabbonim today who are very much against. Either because of tsar, but they think the way it's done is because of tsar, that the animals are suffering. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. Many say the claim of the Aruch HaShulchan that the shchita is not a perfect shchita. It's lax. You can't, and they'll just continue going down that path. Question the shchita, challenge the shchita. That's the biggest challenge is the shchita. The Tsar Baalei Chaim is a big one, and then you have some Sfardim will say, well, anyways, Rabbi Yosef Karo was against it, and the Ramban and the Rashba, and the Rambam doesn't mention it. And then some of them, I've seen some Sfardim say, and B'chlal, it's not in Gemara. I mean, come on, you have the earliest Gaonim say it. It's not in Gemara. It's very hard to pull off that one. But the truth is, the Rambam usually does bring minhagim of Gaonim from the early Gaonim. If this is truly from the early Gaonim, like it seems, how come the Rambam doesn't bring it? Parfisha, as Rashi found the letter of the Gaonim. Yeah. Last is the Maharal in number 17. You got these are beautiful Maharal. I don't know why it's not more known. The Maharal is talking about the story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was traveling into a certain town. He wanted to get a night's stay. No one let him in their house. He had to stay in the field, right? It was him, his donkey, his chicken, and his candle. So the wind came, blew out the candle. The chicken was eaten by a cat, and a lion came and consumed his donkey. That night, the city was raided. The city was taken into captivity, and he was spared. There was no light to give him away, and his chicken and his donkey didn't give him away either. They were dead. He said, "You see, everything Hashem does is for the good." Says the Maharal in his Sefer Nesivos Olam. Look what he says in number 17. When Rabbi Akiva came to that city, he was fitting to die or to be captured with them. Love or love gam came, whatever happened to the city. When Rabbi Akiva entered that city, really he's in the net of the city. He's in the net of the city. The Hainu should have been captured, just like Nishbim, just like the rest were captured. But if he was captured, the Goyim would have killed him completely. Meaning, he said, a person is made up of three parts. They would have taken from him his body, his soul, and his mind. He says a person has three parts. Your body, your soul, and your mind. Okay? Vashem Yisparach wanted to save Rabbi Akiva. So the Eibishter orchestrated that they wouldn't loyov le'oshpiza, they didn't let him have a bed. But the fact is, he was in that city, even though he slept outside the city. Once he went in on that night, he was caught in the net of the Gzeira to be captured. And it was efshir that Shaloya Gzeira, Shaloya Gamkin Shaloya, somehow it had to catch him as well. There had to be a roishim something. Something on his body, something on his soul, something on his mind. So he says, the lion came and ate the chamor. The chamor is the donkey, the chaymer is the corporal part of yourself is your body. That was a tmura masharoi love agufa. In exchange of his body, he lost his donkey. The cat came and ate the tarnagol. The chicken is the soul. That was a tmura, that was an exchange and a kapara for his soul. And the candle that was extinguished was tmuras hasech, exchange of his mind. So he was completely exonerated. There was a tmura. He was exchanged. Umizeh raya gemura min gemura. This is a complete proof to take a chicken for a kapara on your soul. Erev Yom Kippur v'davar zeh yodua. He says the raya is Rabbi Akiva's story because the chicken was a chicken. The chicken of Rabbi Akiva was the kapara for his soul. It's in the Gemara. It's in the Gemara. So if anyone said it's not in Gemara, they said the Maharal. It's in the Gemara. It's in the Gemara.
There's a letter from the Rebbe's father, Prophet Tzaddik Tes, on Yom Kippur, where he talks about the whole thing of Yom Kippur is to elevate Malchus, and therefore, and he brings a remez for the Tarnah.
Yom Kippur is to elevate Malchus.
Yeah, he says there. He said elevate zone to Nukva, right? Holding that. So he brings four random things that have the gematria 306. Dvash, right, which is Isha, right, which is why we take honey. And then he says the whole purpose of the Tarnagol, because in Tur Malka, in the city of Tur Malka, when every chas and kala would go to the wedding, they would send a hen and a rooster in front of them. Why? Because they procreate a lot. And the whole purpose of Beis Zuishtai was afterwards to have procreation. And that's the whole purpose of us with the Eibishter.
Hold
on, the gematria of Tur Malka is also 306.
Beautiful.
And also the gematria of Kippur is 306. So all four gematrias, Tavash, Kippur, and Tur Malka is 306, which is the rem is why we use a Tarnagol for the
beautiful, the Kaparos, beautiful.
I sent you a copy of the letter.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Shkoyach. That's the icing on the cake. Okay.
Zeh Kaporos and Zeh Kaparos is that three phrases for the three.